her mom. I love this candidate. Remember SEIU and the voting booth glitch in Harry Reid's home state of Nevada, where the machines were mysteriously pre-selecting Harry Reid? Don't worry, everything is A-OK. Secretary of State Ross Miller said there's no evidence of voter fraud. Wonderful news. Coming from SEIU-endorsed Ross Miller. Oh, one more endorsement for Secretary of State Miller, George Soros. This is from his SOS project page. By the way, SOS supports secretaries of state who will protect the election. The Secretary of State project, this is George Soros's money. Hand-picking Secretary of States, so they have him in his pocket. Al Franken. Remember Al Franken? Here's the site. Since we launched in the fall of 2006, we have engaged in 11 races and have backed the winning candidate in 9 states, including Ohio, Minnesota, Iowa, Oregon, New Mexico, Montana, and Nevada. No fraud here. So says SEIU and George Soros. You can trust us. Move along. These aren't the droids you're looking for. You have to go out and vote. You have to get everybody you know to go out and vote. Do not allow yourself to get involved with the George Soros cronies. If it is a close call on Tuesday, George Soros will be managing the recounts just to make sure it's fair. Don't let the intimidation of rocks and agitators suppress you. You know, the thing that they don't understand is the more you push an American, the more we stand up. You'll never kick us down. We're not the Greeks. We're certainly not the French. You'll never kick us down. The harder you try to strap us to a table, the more we resist. That's just the way we are. Do you remember right before 8/28, the Black Panthers said, "We will see Glenn Beck, the steps of the Lincoln Memorial." And they said nobody would show up. I didn't even know if people would show up because it was a frightening thing. People called me left and right and said, "I'm afraid. I don't know. Can I bring my kids? Who's going to be there? Do you have enough security for the whole crowd?" Well, you tell me. You tell me. Did Americans sit at home or did Americans show up on 8/28? People are not afraid anymore. And the more evidence of intimidation and fraud, the more committed we become. We stand up because we're Americans. So on Tuesday, get out and vote. And bring your cell phone. If you see something, make sure you take a picture of it or record it. Send it to us. If you have an iPhone, there's a new app. And I look at this, I don't even know if I look at it, I'm like, okay, is it going through Apple? Do I trust Apple? There's a new app to report voter fraud. Download it. You will see the reports filed in your cities and in other cities. You can report an issue. When you press it, it automatically opens up the camera and you can easily report it. Use it if you need to. I hope you don't have to, but I think you're going to. Progressives believe that the ends justify the means. That's what it is. The ends justify it's the rules for radicals, which again, I'd like to point out, Saul Alinsky dedicated to Lucifer. Do you have any friends that just won't wake up? What more do you have to say? Last night, I was sitting at my kitchen table and I voted. And I filled out my absentee ballot. And this is for the very first time I had to do this, or I felt this way. I have to fill out my absentee ballot because I'm covering the elections all day, and I'm in early in the city, and I won't be home until after the polls close. So I filled it out. And I sat there with a pen, and I read that thing back and forth. I'm like, where's the catch? Where's the catch? How are they going to throw this out? And I filled them out. For the first time in my life, I thought to myself, it doesn't matter. It's not going to be counted anyway. That is not true. We must fight that urge. When we feel that way, that's when they have won. That's what they want you to believe. You may be only one voice, but one voice can still change the country. Back in a minute. All right, It's a special edition of the Glenn Beck program, and we have a friend of mine, John Fund, here. He is the author of Stealing Elections, How Voter Fraud Threatens Our Democracy. We also have Scott Baker. He's managing editor of theblaze.com, which is my news website, and we'll talk to him in just a minute. I want to get kind of the history of voter fraud, and because who would have guessed this? We might have some voter fraud problems this election. Take me through the history of voter fraud here, John, a little bit.
Well, customs were different back in the Revolutionary period.
Yeah.
Before our independence, George Washington ran for the Virginia House of Burgesses, the legislature. And in order to get voters to come out to his rallies, he would give out free liquor, free rum. James Madison chose not to engage in that common practice. He lost the election for the delegates. Washington won.
But it wasn't because of the rum, was it?
No, but I'm simply saying that today...
They're doing it with food and beer?
Well, yes, today it's illegal to give out anything, including food, in exchange for voting. In fact, the Arlington Young Democrats just admitted and apologized for giving out free beer to people who could show that they had just voted.
And wasn't Harry Reid doing free food and everything just last week, I think?
And in South Dakota, they used to have raffle tickets for television. You can't give anything of value in exchange for someone voting.
Okay, so then we had Abraham Lincoln, and what is the scandal with Abraham Lincoln?
Well, he would do things like muster out of the military for just before election the Republican soldiers. The Democratic soldiers didn't get their leave, so the Republicans would get to vote. The Democrats would be in camp, couldn't easily vote.
And then we have Reconstruction, the end of slavery.
Well, this man, Rutherford B. Hayes, not he himself, but his party, the Republican Party, certainly stole votes in at least 2 states, and he won the Electoral College vote by 1.
And then we go down to the 1900s Wilson era.
Well, this is the infamous I am the law, Mayor Frank Hague, who was so powerful he was a virtual dictator. And he stole votes wholesale. There were precincts where 90% of the votes were fraudulent. He also had a special desk in his office made so that when a visitor would come in, he could push out the middle drawer in the desk and it would open up in front of the visitor, and the visitor could then deposit
right.
checks.
It's like an old Partners. Have you ever seen the old? I'm trying to remember. It's from it's from the South, I think, where it was the plantation desk, where it would the drawer would slide and you take the money and you could.
And of course, the reason he did this in part was if he ever was called to testify in a trial, he could honestly say no money changed hands.
Unbelievable. Then we go to FDR.
Franklin Delano Roosevelt manipulated all of the New Deal programs so that the money flowed to states where he wanted the elections to go in his favor, and he deprived states that were voting against him.
Are you surprised that we haven't really seen that, or have we seen that with Obama? Because we have a huge stimulus.
Do we know?
Have all the money. No, we don't know yet.
Well, the stimulus money, certainly, there have been studies showing the stimulus money, George Mason University, stimulus money has clearly gone to areas where there's...
Like Ohio.
And Chicago.
Does Chicago need any help to be corrupt?
You never get enough.
Jeez. Then we have, speaking of Chicago, JFK. Huge voter fraud.
His father distributed bales of cash in the West Virginia Democratic primary, defeating Hubert Humphrey. Then in the general election, Mayor Daley in Chicago put his giant thumb on the scales of democracy, and everyone pretty much agrees that the election was stolen in Illinois.
So we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back. Where am I? Over here. We're going to come back and talk a little bit about what's happening today, and then how do you break this cycle? Are we in one of the worst or an average cycle of voter intimidation and fraud, do you think?
Average, a little better than before, because now there's a lot more attention paid to it. 10 years ago, people denied the very existence of voter fraud. Now, at least, some people are looking. And if you have watchdogs out there, the incidence of fraud goes down as long as there's some risk attached to it.
All right. Back in just a second.
A lot of people can't.
I love having the choice, the freedom.
I think it's definitely important. I don't think anyone would deny that.
Citizen's duty.
That's what we fought for, and women in particular fought a very tough battle.
Why do I vote? Well, that is a good question.
Tuesday, it's time to vote. How many in the audience are going to vote this? So everybody's going to vote. And how many of you have trust that your vote's going to be counted? Decent number, about half. How many trusted their vote to be counted, let's say, 1995 compared to now? Okay. I for the first time, I said this at the beginning, for the first time, filled out my my absentee ballot, and I thought, I don't even know if this is going to count. And that is the secret. That's what they're trying to get you to do. We have John Funn, he's the author of Stealing Elections, How Voter Fraud Threatens Democracy. And Scott Baker, he's the managing editor of theblaze.com. The left is mocking the right for even worrying about this, aren't they, Scott?
Absolutely. It's like a full-scale press to say this is just the annual effort by the right to trump up this voter fraud thing because it's going to suppress the vote, it's going to scare off minority voters. And so they're trying to say that there's nothing out there, and you look across the left blogs, it's going on like crazy right now. Why are they not more concerned about focusing on that there are legitimate and very accurate cases of voter fraud going on, and they're busier trying to mock the Republicans and the conservatives for being concerned about that than they are for trying to ferret out what actually is going wrong?
John, why?
Well, you said it earlier. These are not the droids you're looking for. It's deflection. I believe that we have two civil rights in this country, Glenn. We have a civil right that you should be free of intimidation and fear in voting. We have fought a civil rights struggle for that, have a Voting Rights Act, which we have to preserve. But we also have another civil right that all of your listeners should be worried about. Their vote can be canceled out if somebody votes who shouldn't be voting, somebody votes twice, somebody is a felon, somebody's an illegal alien.
Well, what's happening
and your vote can be just as stolen from you if somebody cancels your vote out as if you're prevented from entering a polling place.
That's why I feel like if anything is within 2 points, you lose because of the Secretary of State, because of voter fraud, because of dead people voting. You're going to lose. You know what I mean? It's just gonna. Am I wrong on that? You
can't just have a margin of victory. You have to have a margin beyond litigation.
Exactly. Because
otherwise, you end up in court, and is what happened with Al Franken
and George Soros.
He did not win on election day. He won in court.
Right, and that was George Soros. George Soros learned his lesson. Remember when they were making fun of what's her name, Catherine Harris, during the Al Gore recount. He learned then. Spooky Doo said, "We must get her, or people like her," and so that's what he's doing. And I don't know if anybody knows this. The next thing George Soros is doing, he is now trying. He's got initiatives going on ballots. You know this about the judges? He is trying now to get judges appointed, not through election, but judges appointed by state governors. So he can control elections, he can control the counts, and he can control the judges. When you have that, I mean, this guy
when you're in business, you like a vertically integrated operation.
Yes, you do. But this guy is Al Capone. He is just setting the system up or daily to be able to get all of it to run the way he wants, all in the name of democracy. I want to show you some video here. How many people here know who Francis Fox Piven is? Cloward and Piven. Okay. How many watch this show on a regular basis? Okay. Francis Fox Piven and Cloward and Piven, her husband, they were the guys who came up with the idea of collapse the system, get everybody onto health care or to welfare and collapse the system. But I've told you that they needed structure. They did this back in the 70s with New York, but they needed structure. When it collapsed here in New York, it didn't fall into the hands of anything. And so that's why I've been warning about the healthcare structure, the financial structure, everything that they put in. This week, I showed you that the president talked about that structure in healthcare. It starts out small, but there's a radical end to it. Now I want to show you some video of Francis Fox Piven defending the president. This is about a week ago at the Brecht Forum, which is a far, far left forum for communists, Marxists, and progressives. Listen carefully to what she says about